We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
Welcome to Toward Anarchy. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm your host, Michael Storm, and as always, it's my pleasure to be here every week. Worldwide, it's prime time. It's Saturday night. We're on the Republic Broadcasting Network. We're just people listening to us everywhere all the time. Just an amazing, wonderful, fun thing to be able to do. And so, yeah, of course, I appreciate it. And I appreciate the fact that it's all because of you. You're the one that makes it possible. Wherever you see us, wherever you find the show, please give that like, that share, that follow, the subscribe, whatever it is. That's just the biggest, most simple way that you can help. And I hate to reiterate it because I hate to drag on and drone on about some things, but I have to tell you once again, as being someone who uses this media, the social media, uses a place like YouTube, and I'm conscious of the effort to make sure that an artist or somebody who's produced a piece of work, whether they call themselves an artist or whether they're a news person or whatever it is that they happen to be into that they're doing, that I make sure that I give it that like. When I like it, I make sure it gets that like, and I make sure that it goes to the person who created the work, who originally put it up there. I really try to make sure that what I'm watching, particularly if I'm going to give it a like, is actually from the source, and it's not somebody trying to piggyback on somebody else's work. There's a lot of that happening out there, and you have to watch for it. But wherever you see Toward Anarchy, please give that like, that share, that follow, that subscribe. That's just the best way I can know that you're out there, and it just puts a smile on my face every time I see a new one. Just to know that that people are out there listening, and that they're listening again and again and again. Over and over. That's the neat thing to see, and it's just a great thing to be able to do each week for you. So thank you for being able to do it. Thank you for being here. Do me a huge favor and support the network. It's not about me. I'm just one voice on the network, and just the one voice out of many, many different voices on the network, so it doesn't have to be about me. Even if you don't like this show, you don't like me, you don't like the idea of anarchy, freedom in its most basic sense, fine. That's no problem. To each their own. But support the network, because it's not about me. It's about everybody across the network, and it's about having this place a free speech platform when there are so few of them. And it's very, very, please, just trust me on this. If you don't know for yourself how hard it is to make something like this work, even when a lot of it is technology and computers and things that you can just push a few buttons and produce some stuff. That's the easy part of it. There's so much more behind it than that, trying to run a network like this, trying to run a platform, a free speech place like this. And I know, because I've done it, and it's a lot of work. It's more work than I ever wanted to do, and that's why I don't do it. But that's why I'm also very happy to support the network and be supported by the network. RepublicBroadcasting.org. Click that donate button. That's an easy way to do that. It's a one-time donation or recurring donation, whatever it may be that you can do. If that doesn't work out quite as well for you, if it's not the idea, the way you like things, click that Shop RBN button that's there, or just go to shoprbn.com and that will take you to that win-win situation where you're supporting the advertisers who advertise across the network. It seems like such a simple idea, such a simple notion that you shouldn't have to repeat it, but people do have to be reminded. And it's because people forget and they go on and they're doing their daily thing in their business and their life and all that they have to do. And maybe RBN jumps into their lives just every once in a while, maybe just a couple hours a week, and they don't think about it necessarily at the time. And if somebody doesn't say, hey, please make sure that we can continue to do this and support the network, they're maybe not thinking about it. And how can you blame them? It has to be out there in front of their faces. So I'm putting out in front of your face right now, support the network, republicbroadcasting.org. And again, this is if you can. This is not. We're not asking anybody who is outside of their means, who's struggling to feed their families, anything like that. That's not what this is about by any means. You can do that like thing, that share, that follow, and the subscribe. Those things are such a big deal. Do not take for granted how important that is and how much you're doing it can really support me. I got to grab this chair here. Struggling with my chair there. It's giving me a hard time. I'm just sitting in it, and I can hear it make noises. So I'm in a different chair now. It's not doing it. Oh, God, oh, man. Trying to do a performance and a one-taker like this, even though the show is not live, it's a few hours before showtime, before it actually airs across the network, if you will. I still one-take this stuff. This is the way I do things. I'm here to say and do and speak me, the truth, as I see it, as it actually is, because I don't tend to try to color it with my own vision of the world. I'm very accepting of the fact that my vision of the world and what it could or should be or what it might be based on my own opinions is pretty small and pretty useless and really only good to me, and that's why I practice it in my life. That's why I have what success I do have in the face of having to struggle just like anybody else with the various influences in our lives from the beginning of our birth, the where we're born and who we're born to, depending on their intelligence and their wealth and the things that they can pass down to us and the good or bad ideas that they can instill in us from the beginning, just like anybody else. So that's a lot of the reason why I come and do and hang out with you and do this, because it's normal. It is what everybody is experiencing, and maybe just a little bit different. But I don't have to color that reality with any sort of different perspective to try and make it look like it's something that it's not. It's a truth that everyone recognizes, and that's just the go get it. Get out there, do your thing, be who you are. We're told it so many times, but we don't take it to heart. We're told that we can be anything that we want, but we're told something silly like we can grow up to be the president. That's interesting. That's kind of a neat thing to think about trying to do. But then if you scratch the surface of the idea of just being the president, well, what is the president? Well, we've had some wonderful examples. That's all that's going on in the world right now. Let's get this thing going here. Jump to towardanarchy.com. Just take that minute if you're not tied up, if you get some free hands. Take a moment to go to towardanarchy.com and look for May 18th, and that's where it is right now. It's a little earlier than the day than you might be hearing it, but it is the 18th. No matter what, just click on the 8th. The episodes button, and you can climb your way through there. It's just a couple of clicks away if it's not right there on the front page. May 18th, you'll see Dr. Dean Lloyd joining me here in the second hour. That's fantastic, wonderful. Love talking to Dean Lloyd. Just as a person, again, just a normal person experiencing things, a slightly different variation of life that he's experiencing it, but he's experiencing it in much the same way as something that we like to talk about a little bit, like to bring up a little bit between the two of us because of the similarities between us and yet being so really different and in different spaces and different places in life, but to still have those same general acceptance of the world, like I was just talking about. I accept it that the world is different, that other people are different. I'm willing to let them be that way until they start throwing around authority and the idea that somebody somewhere else is in control of what you and I should be doing from one minute to the next, that there should be some dictatorship over and they don't want to call it that word. They want to call it a democracy, or they want to call it voting, or the republic, or they just want to put some spin on the idea that somewhere, somehow along the line, you and I, as individuals, lose the ability to do a whole bunch of different things that we should otherwise be able to do, whether they're good for us or not. That's not the point. We should be able to do them, and we should be able to do them without having to concern ourselves with with retaliation from authority in particular. Anything that you do, you can suffer consequences, particularly if you would do it publicly or openly, or through other people and their property. Of course something like that could happen. It could be a terrible thing. It would completely cause you to break down that whole you're safe notion, that you're protected notion, that you have some right or you have some protected ability to do something. This is exactly what I'm talking about, that there's a line there that everyone should see, and we generally seem to. It usually is something that we recognize, but for some reason, at some point, somewhere along the line, again, it falls off. We lose that individualism, and we're supposed to submit to a collective. We're trained for it. We're taught it in the schools. It's built into us. You have to probably break out of the public education system for sure, in general, to be able to get away from it, to be able to have some clear perspective about what is really going on in the world and what it means when someone says that they have authority over you. Not what it means in terms of how they present it to you. Of course, they're going to present it to you as it's the best thing for you. It's the best thing for society. It's the best thing for our democracy. It's just the best because they're doing it. Well, come on, man. If you're going to sit there and complain about sort of corporations selling you things and selling you on ideas and getting you to buy into their thing, and you're wasting your time and your money and energy on their thing that you don't really like, just turn around and place that same judgmental idea on the notion that the people who you are voting for are really worthy in any way of being in charge. Whether they have this game that they're playing. They're telling you constantly that you're wrong. You're constantly being gaslighted. This is across the board in pop culture and across the social media and politics. And it's because you could say that it's because the cream rises to the top and then the cream gets noticed. Everybody turns their eye to it. Oh, there it is. There they are. There's those people. Those are the best. Because they must be, because they're the ones getting the attention, and they make a whole bunch of money, and they get a whole bunch of votes. Again, this is across the board in pop culture, politics, whatever it is. It's an illusion that the best are being spotlighted, that the best is being shown to us. I would argue that it's not the best. It's the best commercially. It's the best that you can sell. It's an easy sell. That's why so much of TV is such a fantasy, because while it can be all of these real life situations, you have these ER shows and cop shows and fire shows that had just been big on television for many, many years, certainly since the 80s, with your St. Elsewhere and your Hill Street Blues that kind of blew up those things. There were some before that as well, so it was a natural thing for it to do, but it's just continued to grow since your St. Elsewheres and your Hill Street Blues. Those things have come, and stories like those have come out, and that's all you see in there. And it's a one-sided view of it. Even when they pay lip service to the other things that are going on in society, because they can't really get away without doing it, they still try to find a way to justify it in favor of the state, in favor of authority, and for no particular reason, because this is what happens when you scratch that surface out there. We're talking about being the president. Oh, it'd be a neat thing to be able to do. It's such a kid's idea is what it is to grow up to be the president. It's a very childish thing, a very narcissistic idea, a very ridiculous notion that one person should be elected with, charged with, to have the power to do many of the things that the president believes that they can do. It's a very narcissistic view, certainly, because you're certainly ascribing to yourself a better attitude, position, idea, thought about what the rest of the world should be or how it should be, regardless of what your intention is. Even if you were an anarchist going in there and say, yeah, absolutely, I'm 100% anarchist. If you elect me, I'm going to destroy government. I'm going to bring it down from the inside. Well, there's a problem with that. That's just as bad as doing the other thing, as setting up the government. Yeah, the government may be extremely oppressive, but it's also long established. It's something that's been around for a long time, and so there's a whole base of normal people that will be drastically affected by you going in and completely dismantling everything. It may and probably would be assuming that everything plays out well and there's no new state or no new dictatorship of state and boundaries and just weird ideas on paper, instead of it just being about people being able to go where they need to go, do what they need to do, and to work with who they need to work with when they want to. Instead of it being about that, we find ourselves in this position where when you scratch the surface off of what they're really doing there, any of those people in authority, what you find is, one, they've just created for themselves, or they've found themselves in a space where they get paid to do nothing, or a whole lot of nothing, particularly if you're talking about the politics and the politicians, those guys. Maybe you get a little further down onto the street, sort of literally with the cops and things. They may do something. They may work a 9 to 5. But let's put it in terms that most people here will be able to understand. They're welfare whores. That's it. They're welfare whores. That's all there is to it. They're just complete welfare whores. They are living off of the system. They found a way to do it, and they found a way to rationalize using the force of government to make other people see things their way or do things their way, or at best their constituents' way. So there's no win in taking what is already established and completely destroying it and leaving people out here going, well, what the hell do we do now? You take it down completely slowly, but you still run into this problem that it's not what everybody wants, and that's why I say that anarchy is not going to work on any larger scale. It has to be what it is between individuals, between you and me. That's what anarchy has to be. It has to stay that way. There's just no two ways around it, because you start getting extremes and you start getting too big. Another thing that we talk about all the time, it's just too big. That's part of the problem, is that people don't realize, even for themselves in their own lives, when it's too much, it's too big, you've taken on more than you can manage, and that means that somewhere, whether it's you physically, mentally, begin to break down, or part of the process, or whatever you're producing, whatever it is, your life, your work that you're having to deal with, that you're filling this time up with, is going to suffer. Once that business reaches a certain size and it's out of your control, barring being able to trust other people to take on your position when you're not there, which is a hard thing to do, you have to try and stay in control of it and try and manage it. And if you don't, it's going to fall off. And even if you do bring somebody in, it's still not going to be exactly the way you want it to be necessarily. Not necessarily. Maybe. It could be. It's so much of a variable, like everything, that it should be left to be decided by those who are doing it. This is at the crux of the issue with authority, because it comes along and has made so many things illegal. It is said that there are so many things that we can't do. And one of the problems that I have with was exposed in a story that sort of happens here. It happened here in Kansas here this week, and it happens everywhere, all the time. It's this creep. It's an encroachment. It's power creep. It's something that I deal with in video games and card games at the comic book shop, and having to deal with the release of new sets and new characters and new updates and all these things that change the power structure within an existing system. And it's always it's never for us. They're never giving us back power. That's such a rare thing. There was one example that I can't even think of right off the top of my head what it was, but just recently something. But because it's so rare, it just doesn't happen. They just never give the power back. And if they can find another way to grab that power back that they do give to you, they will. They'll find another way to do it. But so they already control the education system. It's already a completely manipulated, controlled market. And so here in Kansas, it's no different. And just this last week, the Kansas Board of Education here voted to pass amendments to graduation requirements, which they haven't done in 20 years, which sounds like a bad idea. Graduation requirements over a 20-year period. Do you know how much the world has changed in the last 20 years? It doesn't seem like a good idea if you're trying to manage such a large thing. We were talking about the public education system. Holy crap, you're trying to get everybody into it. You're trying to stuff everybody into this little box and spit them out the other side to be good little drones within the system. That's really all they are. It's just sort of mindless drones walking around feeding the system in one way or another, either directly or indirectly. The government, the system either leeches off of them or they support it. Many of them support it. That's why I'm saying you can't just necessarily just jump right in there and tear down everything around everybody and expect them to pick them up themselves. It's one of the ways the government uses its ability to power creep, is that as things get bigger, as society itself gets bigger, government's already not able to control the larger society. And so society continues to grow. Government has to grow with it too. It's an excuse that it uses. Oh, well, society's changing. Well, government has to change. And so we have to have power creep. We have to have more power to be able to do the things that we do. We have to have more money. We have to. This is the very nature of the beast. It's trying to stay ahead of society, and it's trying to manage society. But society is not manageable. Society manages itself in every single individual transaction, and that's not just a money thing. All things are transactions. Love is a transaction. Just a conversation between two people is a transaction. Right now, you listening to me is a transaction. You decided that some of your valuable time, the one thing that we all have, and we don't know how much of it that we have, for how long it's going to last, you decided to use some of it to spend here listening to this show, listening to this network, supporting this network. This power creep that these guys have is sick. So they changed the graduation requirements here after years of ignoring them and after years of failing and everything that comes along with it. And so you have 4 units of English, you have 3 units of history and government, you have 3 units of science and 3 units of mathematics. Also, it's fantastic so far, right? Not too bad. 1/2 unit of physical education. That certainly doesn't sound like enough physical education to me. People need to be up and moving around. But let's just say it's the bare minimum, and it's what people will tolerate. That's one of the problems with the so compulsory nature of the public school system is that people are forced into it. Excuse me, and they're given guidelines, requirements along the lines of these, and then there's things within there that they don't want to do, and things that they're incapable of doing, and things that they shouldn't have to do. So you get, let's see, 1/2 unit of physical education and 1/2 unit of health education. That's not enough. It's not enough to understand yourself and who you are. 1/2 unit of financial literacy. Don't even get me started on how not effective that is. 1/2 unit of advanced science. Who knows what that means? Let's see, 4 1/2 units of elective courses. The stuff you get to pick out yourself. That's fun. And 2 or more, it starts to fall off real quick here. So you get through all that. All that's tolerable. It's within reason. It seems reasonable enough. One of the reasons I jumped into this article was because I was looking to see if there was something about them altering the grading scale now and lowering the bar, just totally lowering the bar. Well, this is what you get from government. You get lowering the bar, lowering the standards, so that more and more people can more easily get over the bar, or you get this power creep. And this is where it starts to fall apart. Tell me I'm wrong in this. I'm easy to find, towardanarchy.com, at Toward Anarchy, anywhere across the internet, basically. Just type it in and tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong on this. If this doesn't just fall apart after those units that people need there. 2 or more accomplishments approved by state board that demonstrate the student as a successful graduate. Isn't that what grading is doing? Isn't that what taking the courses is doing? What is it? State board, 2 or more accomplishments. What the hell does that mean? So right there, they've taken power, they've taken control over the education, the final result in the education there, and saying your education, even though we're the ones that provided it for you, wasn't good enough. You have to have accomplished 2 other things. Maybe it's community service or something like that. It doesn't say. That's part of the problem with this vague language in a lot of these things, and the way that government writes stuff like this, creates things like this so that it benefits them. So if they do something wrong, they can go back and point to, oh, well, that's not what we meant in here. We realize that the language isn't clear, but that's, when the language wasn't clear, that's what we were trying to get at, is that we couldn't do and cover all of these things, and they expect to be prepared for every instance because it can't. And that's why you don't do it. You end up half-assing it. That's what ends up happening. 2 or more accomplishments approved by a state board to demonstrate the student as a successful graduate. Okay. Additionally, students, I told you, it falls off real quick after we get past those. Additionally, students must make one of the following filings, and this is such a trap. Tell me I'm wrong on this. This is and is this happening in other places? It was something that I immediately thought of when I saw this. Is this happening in other places? I didn't go look because I was into something else, and I'm doing my thing and moving on from it. But I doubt very seriously that the state of Kansas is into setting too much legal precedent. It's been a while. It's been 80 years or something like that. 70 or 80 years. I know. I'm sorry. I don't know. Roe v. No. God, I even got that wrong. Brown v. Board of Education. That's here in my backyard, but I know nothing about it because if the black man had been smart, he'd have stayed the hell out of the public school system. If everybody were smart, they'd stay the hell out of the public school system. Additionally, students must make one of the following filings unless exempted by a chief administrative officer, a free application for student aid with the U.S. Department of Education, or a waiver with the governing body that a parent or guardian, if the student is 18 years or older, that the student understands that they've chosen not to file for student loans. Do you want me to go through just real quick again? Additionally, students must make one of the following filings unless exempted by one of them. So there's no out for anybody except through their authority. We'll talk about that. It's National Police Week. I'll do that here in just a second. A free application for federal student aid with the U.S. Department of Education. They have to fill it out. Or they have to file a waiver with the governing body that a parent or guardian, and this, I suppose this is supposed to, or if the student is 18 years or older, that the student understands, that the parents understand that they've chosen to opt out. So it was already a captured public school system. This to me, tell me I'm wrong, this to me sounds like they're going to capture the next level of education. They already do through the loans, but the colleges are still, they appear very independent. Aside from the state colleges, there's a lot more than just state colleges. They seem to have some independence outside the public education system. They don't, not really. It's all governed by the same bodies when it comes down to it. It's all money, stolen money from the same people. So, am I wrong? Is this not just more power creep? Is this something else? Am I misreading this? To me, this sounds like power creep. This is them saying here that you will go into debt with the federal government. You will go to college. That's the next step. They're going to force you, because you have to pay to go to college. They're going to force you, and all of this is leading in one direction. Somebody says, oh, no, that's not what they're going to do. I'll tell you what they're going to do. They're going to socialize it. Yes, that's exactly it. You tear it down piece by piece until you socialize the whole thing. And so the government is paying for everything. And when the government is picking up the tab, they get to make all of the rules. That's one of the things that they've set aside for themselves in our beautiful little democracy, our republic, this America that we have here today, is that they've set aside our ability to change things for their own ability to change things through contracting with them in one way or another. And it's usually a tacit agreement. So they don't spell out to you that a driver's license is a tacit agreement that you will obey by their traffic laws. They tell you you're going to obey their traffic laws, but they don't tell you that as a human being you should. Certainly, it's expected, it's believed here in America, have the right to travel any place that you can without violating somebody's private property where they don't want you to go, any way you want to. If you want to drive around in a car without a license, there's no reason why the state should have you licensed. There's no reason why the state should be in control of driving. There's no reason why the state should be in control of roads. And somebody's going to say, well, how could we build all these roads, and how can we get from one place to another? You're looking at it from within a false paradigm. The paradigm is that we have no roads, or that we have roads controlled by the state. But the fact is we have many, many, many private roads all throughout America that are perfectly fine, perfectly maintained. And when you're talking about all of this, again, we're talking about the size and scope of it. So you need to get from one side of the nation to the other. You need to be able to get there. The trucks need to be able to get there, if nobody else. So what do? Well, you have a commerce clause. Well, that apparently gives you the power to control the means of transportation from one place to another, not just the sort of managing the discrepancies between one place and another within a legal sense. That's what the Commerce Clause really is about. It's the same thing that the Supreme Court is supposed to be in terms of being the third party in disputes and trying to resolve differences and trade differences and disputes between states, between people in different states, between people in states. That's what those clauses are about. They're really very self-explanatory. None of these things, none of these founding documents give our government the authority to take control of the roads. None of that gives the state. None of those documents. There's nothing in any of the documents, the founding documents of this nation, that say that the states should have the ability to control our transportation. But because of the fact that it's not explicitly spelled out within the Constitution or within the Bill of Rights, one or the other, somewhere that they don't have control over those things, well, of course, they're going to wrest control over them. And do you see yet another problem with this idea that, one, it's growing and bigger and bigger and bigger, and that you can try to manage all of those things, but that you can simply give over the power of the ability of somebody to travel to a committee somewhere else, when in particular, this is the problem, right? The person is not harming anybody. Just because they don't have a driver's license, just because they don't have a license plate, just because they don't have insurance, just because they don't have a registration, none of those things dictates how well a person drives. None of those things improves a person's driving ability or makes it any worse. You might be able to argue that the licensing does, except that it's a low bar. It's a really, really low bar. You basically just have to be able to see above the steering wheel to get a driver's license. That's about it. They don't get into a much more complicated understanding and feel for driving that someone would get over time. That's not what happens in licensing. All that's about is control. It's all about draining money out of your pocket and figuring out where you are and making sure it was a really easy way to make people carry identification so that they could force you to identify yourself. If they force you to have a license while you're in a car, if they decide that they want to stop you for whatever reason they've made up, they can identify you. And you have to, because you're driving the car, and you have to have a license, and it has to be yours, and it has to be up to date, and it has to have your current address. It's all about tracking and control. There's nothing that they're doing within any of these functions. And you can break down every single bit of government, every single branch of government, and into all of these little bitty pieces of who they are and what they do and what it is that their supposed branch of government is supposed to do. And the fact is all they do is suck money out of our pockets. That's it. They're just welfare whores. They're just in a position to do just enough. They don't ever have to produce results. They don't ever have to pay for it when occasionally one of them politically won't get elected, but then they'll just be a carpetbagger. They'll just go somewhere else where they can get reelected in another space, get elected in another place, another state. There's just so many ways around the things that they get punished for. No, they never pay for the mistakes. They never pay for the broken economy, even though they're the ones that did it. Nothing, never, no. It's so laughable to suggest that there's a rule of law. And I want to get to that here, but I wanted to do this first because I wanted to. It's this National Police Week, and I didn't know it. I didn't know it until, I don't know, probably Thursday. And when I did finally see it, I was, oh, well, okay, of course. It's a week of remembrance. It's a national week of remembrance, and we should take the time to remember the police and remember the fact that dead cops bring it on themselves and they deserve it. And that may be a harsh thing to say if you are a cop or if you are someone who loves a cop for whatever reason. Your Uncle Jim, I don't know, whoever it is, dad, mom, brother, sister, who's a cop. But don't get your blue line panties in a wad. Just let me explain to you why. You think that it's simple. You think that they're doing their job. You think that they're taking care of, they're protecting, they're serving and protecting the community, but they're not. First of all, the police don't prevent crimes. Let's just get that ridiculous notion out of the way right now. Let's just set it completely aside because it's not true. The police don't prevent crimes. They're never there to stop crimes. By happenstance, maybe. But the fact is anybody walking around anywhere, any place, notices a cop car, sees one of these clowns in their clown costumes, whatever it is, they're not going to commit a crime in that space. So the police don't prevent crime except by their very presence. And there's not enough of them, and nor should there be. That should definitely not be your reasoning. To put them, that they be everywhere, that they could prevent crimes. They don't prevent crime. They show up to crime scenes 9 to 13 minutes. These are the statistics, FBI statistics. You can go look it up. The long side's like 20 minutes. 9 to 13 minutes to get there, and then they often escalate the situation because they're not there to resolve the situation. They're there to enforce the law. Your policeman, that person you love, doesn't give a damn about what claim has been made against a person. It does in any legal or moral sense whatsoever. It doesn't matter the nature of the crime or the claim or the complaint. It doesn't matter who the victim is, if there is a victim, if there really is a victim, or what the penalty might be. They just are there to enforce the law and in that case enforce some claim either by them or by the state in the form of laws or by some other person that they've done something wrong. And again, particularly if it's one of those laws that they're enforcing as opposed to the word of some other person, that you will address their claim, you'll address it in their forum, you'll address it under their rules, to their satisfaction, and if you don't, they'll kill you. And if you understand that, your cop, your policeman, that person that you love, that you're so upset about me for saying that they deserve to die for what they do, that they bring it on themselves, because they do. This is what the police do. They drive around our cities armed like gang members, pretending to serve and protect while pulling people over for failing to use a turn signal and ticketing them and robbing them at gunpoint. Revenue generation. That person that failed to use that turn signal hasn't violated anybody, hasn't hurt anybody. At most, he's violated political and social opinion. He has hurt no person. He has damaged no property. He is guilty of no real crime, no, in any sense of the word, not even in the legal sense. He hasn't done anything to anyone. Someone came along and fabricated a crime. They said that it's a crime not to let other people know you're turning, because if you don't let other people know you're turning, it might cause an accident. Except that uncountable times throughout every single day, all around the world, there are people that drive around without using their blinkers. They don't get in any accidents. It happens all the time. People speed all the time. They pass the speed limit all the time. Nothing happens. So they're not protecting. They're not preventing any crime. They're using the opportunity to use political, social opinion to rob that person, to make a claim against them. That's what a claim is, a claim of a violation. They claim that they violated their political or social opinion, and now you owe them money for it. And if you don't pay them the money for it, they're going to kill you. Do you understand that just failing to do this, to address their claim in their form, under their rules, to their satisfaction, over a failed turn signal, failure to use a turn signal, they can kill you. And they can do it legally. They can justify it. They will find a way to justify it. Well, it wasn't about the turn signal. Yeah, well, that's what started it originally. He just failed to use a turn signal, but then he didn't show up to court. So we issued a warrant for him. Well, and then so there's a warrant out for him, and now so he's a criminal. He's not just a guy who didn't show up to court for whatever reason. It doesn't matter. You shouldn't have to come up with the reason because it's a bogus claim in the first place. Claims are only valid against somebody when there's an actual victim and when there's evidence of a crime. But when damage, that's what evidence of a crime is. It's damage or the thing that damaged it and tying the thing that damaged it to the person who did the damaging. These aren't complicated ideas. And they're not meant to be complicated ideas. They were meant to be very simple ideas so that any person would be able to just live within the system. That there be some sort of system in place to manage some things and that you could participate in it. But then it got too big. Then it became centralized. Then it's top down. It's not you and I working side by side in our community to make things better in our community, which will make things better in our city, which will make things better in our state, which will make things better in the nation and in the world. Just the butterfly flapping its wings kind of thing. Any of these. Look, when I say that these cops, they deserve it, they bring it on themselves. It's not out of malice for an individual. I don't hate you as a cop. I don't hate your Uncle Jim. That's not what it's about. It's about what they represent. And it's about not feeling sorry for people, whether they realize it or not, and you have to. You took 20 years on the force. You didn't realize you were violating people. That what you're doing wasn't protecting the people, but just making a paycheck and making a paycheck for the lawyers and the judges and the DAs. And you didn't realize that after 20 years of doing it. I call BS on you right now. Because if I could see it instantly from birth, just out of the womb, looking at it and see it for what it is, you can't work within it for 20 years and not see it for what it is. That's why you have so many people who form a military or form a police or something like that. They'll back the blue, they'll show up for those things. But when it comes down to it, they're not real proud of their service. They're not real proud of what they've done because they didn't really do anything. If they ever stop to think about it. They ever stop to say, what was it that I did every single day? Did I ever save a life? No. I killed a bunch of people, locked a bunch of people in cages. That's freedom. It's certainly American freedom. I don't hate these people because of who they are. I don't know them. So you love your Uncle Jim, your policeman, your cop. I get it because you love them for who they are. You don't love them because they're a cop. You can't even love what cops do. If you do, there's something sick, something wrong with you. And there are a lot of people in this nation, just to finish the thought, the idea that justice, it's a huge joke, right? It's a huge joke. It should be obvious to people right now that justice is a huge joke because we have this ridiculous trial going on for the president. It's obvious. I don't care about this president. I don't care about this president. I don't care about that president. I don't care about their ambitions for the presidency or anything. But I do care about the law, and I do care to listen to people on the right who are all about this law, rule of law. The police are always right. Just comply. Just do this. Just do that. Go ahead. Get locked up in a cage and then try to figure your way out of the cage after you've been locked up in the cage, even though it's bogus. You conservatives, you make me sick. in this respect, in regard to this entire notion about the rule of law, because you'll sit there and you'll say something about these ridiculous people on the left and they're defund the police as if, well, let's just take a little bit of money away from them. It's not the money that's the problem, it's the power. It's the power that they have. It doesn't matter if there's 5 of them or 500 of them. It's what they've been enabled with. It's what they've been led to believe, that they have this authority, that they can act the way that they act. That's why it doesn't matter if it's a white man in the uniform, or a black man in the uniform, or a Chinese man in the uniform, or a Mexican in the uniform. They're all scumbags. It's got nothing to do with who that person is, that person that you know. I'm sorry that you feel that way about that person that you know, and I'm sorry that that person became a cop and has decided that they're going to be one of these people who leeches off the system, one of these welfare whores who uses every political and social opinion at his disposal to excuse violating other people, violently violating other people over those political and social opinions. What we're going through right now with this president is he's being railroaded politically. And while you think, the Matt Walshes, this guy's supposed to be an attorney or something, to sit there and to act so incredulous about this, what's happening to the president. He can't believe that this is going on, and all of these right-wing commentators and people in the news, and I can't believe what's going on with this president. I just can't believe this miscarriage of justice. I don't understand how this is continuing to go on and how they can fabricate this. And that's your political system. That's your justice. That's the law, the rule of law that you have in America. Do you not understand that? That just because it's been turned around and weaponized and pointed at you doesn't mean that it hasn't been weaponized and pointed at the rest of us for so long as you can continue to sit there on the sidelines and scream, rule of law, just comply. Kiss my ass. Seriously. I don't even have the time or the words for it anymore. I'm so sick of playing this back and forth, left and right, ridiculous joke of a game, and when something so important as the idea, and so simple as the idea of justice comes up, and it has to be perverted by left and right, and then the left and the right sits there and pretends like it's okay until one of their own is up there on the stand and being poked at and prodded at, and they're having a ridiculous list of crimes being leveled against them by the same people who said it's a crime, even if it's not a crime. Again, it's the same. You must address the claim in their forum, under their rules, to their satisfaction, or they will kill you. They will lock you in a cage. They will keep you from the presidency. They will use every excuse that they can to justify how they're right. And do you not see that what's happening here in this nation has happened before across every major nation before? There's so much history that points to this back and forth. This is just in the last 200 years. This is even, you could go back so much further. This is what happens when things get too big, when people try to wrest too much control over individuals instead of and it's not even over individuals, because they wouldn't make a law and point at it at one person and say that individual is why we're passing this law. That would be discriminatory. They couldn't get away with something like that. No, it's for all of us. It's for the better of us. It's what we need as a society. But you can't control society, and society continues to grow, and so you have to continue to grow the government, and it won't stop. And then you end up in a situation like this a couple hundred years down the road, if you're lucky. And you have this situation where it's just tit for tat, it's back and forth, and your political system hinges on the notion that not enough of our money or effort as individuals is being taken from us and put into this system. We have to give it more and more so that they can put on their show. That was one of the big conversations this week. Then they agreed to debates. Yeah, let's see. Biden and Trump agreed to debate on June 27th and then September 10th. And it's obvious. This is very transparent what this is about. Of course, the president, the former president, Trump, he would be agreeing to this because it would be outside, theoretically, these things would exist outside of the traditional corrupt political system that is, and that gives him some opportunity. But I think really what it breaks down for Biden, it gives the left an opportunity to put him to the test and put him on show before it gets too much closer to the election, before it gets too much closer to the time when they actually commit. Because technically, he's not their guy yet. It's the base assumption. But the Democratic Convention will determine that, and things could change just like that. Especially if you get stumbling, fumbling Joe out there, but it seems like everything else is sort of, they've swung it to his advantage too. So it'll be interesting to see because it's outside the typical debate platforms. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be any better. It actually is going to be worse because it just reinforces the false left-right paradigm. That's what happens there. You're cutting out all the middlemen. You're cutting out all those third parties. None of those guys are going to get invited to these particular parties. And because they are special and different, even if they lack the pageantry that is blamed on the voting, the commission, that handles the debates, the debate commission. Typically would, but they won't be handling these debates. It's outside of their venue. It's outside of their forum. It'll get attention. It'll get extra attention, and that's what they're all hoping on. But that just plays into continuing the corrupt system, the back and forth, the left and right. It just back and forth. That's tit for tat. That's all that I see going on. I just watch abuse of power batted forth and back and used against the last person, blaming it on the last person. The economy is as bad as it is right now, not necessarily because of what Joe Biden has done or hasn't done, but because of the fact that in the couple years before he got in there, there was another guy in office who printed 80% of the money that's ever been printed during that period of time. That's how big the difference was. That's how big of a change it was with them adding their the stimulus for yet another problem that government created and exacerbated. We're closing in on the end of this hour. That means that we're jumping in with Dr. Dean Lloyd. All the links and everything, a couple of the different things that I talked about and more are up there, towardanarchy.com. Look for May 18th, and that's where you'll also find the information about Dr. Dean Lloyd. He'll join us here right after the top of the hour. He's going to jump in, and we're going to talk about running in circles. Is that what you're doing? Are you running in circles? Are you caught in a trap of just back and forth? And it's really what I was just talking about in a different form, on a bigger scale, I guess. Or are you taking aim at what a problem is or what a solution is and trying to do something about it? Again, I would reiterate that idea of being angry or upset or something at a situation or a thing. You need to stop that because those aren't resolutions to the problem. If you're upset, angry about something, you either can do something about it or you can't. That's step number one, figuring out whether you can or you can't. If you can't, let it go. It's not your problem. If you can do something about it, then get up off your ass and go do something about it. That would be the simplest explanation, instead of sitting around and being angry. And government doesn't fall into that. You can sit around and be angry at government, and there's nothing you can do about it, and even the things that you could do about it wouldn't do anything about it. We got to go. Dr. Dean Lloyd's coming up next. Stick around.
We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
I am always excited to see what hour number 2 brings, and today doubly so because, as always, I'm excited to speak with my friend Dr. Dean Lloyd. He is my guest today. He's a facilitator and a healer. He's evolving the species, helping us through the growing process and the healing process, and we're working on connecting that body and mind and spirit and all it, just being completely at one with ourselves, and that, of course, being a gateway to being at one with others. You can follow along toward anarchy.com. You'll be looking for May 18th, and of course the links are there. If you want to know more about Dr. Dean Lloyd, you like to hear, you like what you hear today, and you'd like to find out more about him. You'd like to find out more about Cruising the Epiphany Highway, the book by Ann Rosen. That link is there as well. You can follow up. You can join Dr. Lloyd's email list. He keeps us updated on some interesting things. I like seeing the things that you're following and the things that you're interested in and doing, Dr. Lloyd. And when I say friends, I think that we are friends. We've been talking so long. We've never met each other. We're the epitome of one of these sort of long-distance relationships. I guess people used to do it by pen and paper and used to email each other back and forth and play chess by mail and stuff like that. But we have the luxury of living in the time that we do, and we get to have these little conversations. And we've had some conversations outside of here, and we have conversations before and after the show a lot of times as well. And some of that's captured. If you catch the Rumble video of this, you will be able to, well, I guess if you catch any of the stream stuff, it doesn't have to be the Rumble video. If you catch any of the streams, it won't be on the network airing, but on the streams, you'll be able to pick it up. There's some extra conversations, some fun things that we're talking about. And I imagine there probably will be for a few minutes after the show as well. It always seems that we do because, again, I consider you a friend, and we're talking about things that the reason that I like talking with you is because we happen to be on something of the same level. We work in different fields, really very, very different fields in terms of what we do physically in a sort of day-to-day, but on a much higher level, we do the exact same thing. We talk to people about reality. Reality as we see it, reality as it's affected us, and use that as a gateway and our own understanding and our own dealing with our own troubles and overcoming our own obstacles in life in getting a message to other people that they're capable of doing it too. And one of the things that I really enjoy about our conversations is that it's something that I mentioned just before we got started here, was this idea that you and I, we have artistic endeavors and things like that in common. We both play instruments, and we both like to, well, we like to be entertained musically, I'd say for sure. That's at the top of the list, and we like to create music of our own, and that's always a great big connection. And it's neat to be able to develop a connection with someone like yourself who again, we're on this level that just as we were talking about before the show started, that I think it's not just me. You were very complimentary to me leading into the show, but it's true of yourself too, that we're intermediaries. We're people in the middle of ideas and ideology and sort of lost in time and space. And while it's a massive burden for us individually, as ourselves personally, it's a wonderful thing. Like many comics or actors or people who perform or musicians who get out in front of people and put their emotions and put their life and their truth out in front of people and just accept it and people have to accept it for what it is. But at any rate, you are one of those people who can translate those high-level ideas to low-level ideas or low-level thinkers. And let's face it, there are a lot of people out there, and you should not be ashamed of this if you are a low-level thinker, because that's what I started to get at just right there, was this idea that we have things, and so the music in common and the love of music and the pursuit of that, and understanding the importance of it and understanding how important that is in terms of us as individuals, but also in how we communicate with other people. And it's just one more of the things that you're able to understand when somebody else has a different thing than you. You have your thing, you acknowledge your thing, maybe others as well, but it's our thing that we share together. And you accept those things of other people, and the most you would ever do with those people, as long as they're not harming other people, and if they are harming themselves, you would get them to question themselves. So what I'm getting at, Dr. Lloyd, is it's always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend.
Thank you. Yeah, it's wonderful when you can relate to somebody. I mean, you're sharing the life with them. I'm sharing my life with a lot of medical professionals, of course, but I'm a, as you put it, a mediator, but I would like to consider myself a friend of humanity first, because we are using knowledge, those of us that have some medical background, to facilitate the evolutionary process so that we're not repeating the same dumb thing, if I may say so. So I wanted to call today's show Running in Circles, or Taking Aim and Moving Toward a Solution. And to launch into that direction, you spoke about being a mediator. One of the most important things is that we relate our experiences and make them so that they have meaning. You don't want to get caught up in the experience your whole life. You go through the experience, but you don't go dummy up. If you know that you're going to get involved in something that isn't going to serve you, you've got to you're responsible for putting up the necessary, your guard up, so to speak. You've got to catch yourself before you get sucked into something. I've seen this happen in, quite a few areas where people come to me where they're constantly being drained by their relationship, and that they accept that they're never going to leave the dysfunctional situation, right? So they keep going around in circles. They never break the pattern. And one of the questions that I wrote down in the email I sent you to consider is, you can't change anyone. And so our job is to identify with what it is that is and isn't working, so that we're not running around in circles. And when we say that we want a solution, we have to have some experience to what it is that has worked for us in the past and what hasn't. So let me bring it to the simplistic body connection. All right, your body never, this is, I take excerpts from, if you're new, I take excerpts from Cruising the Epiphany Highway, Volume 2, mostly, from Dr. Amrosen, who is my dearest friend and colleague, who passed away a few years ago. But he and I had collaborated on creating the Evolving the Species website and the project that is for both everybody and specifically for medical professionals too. So I'll just take a little excerpt from that to launch into my next several points. But we'll start with this. Your body never breaks down for no reason. Okay? Barring accidental injury or intentional assault, there are basically two ways you imbalance the body towards breakdown. Number one, either you put the wrong substances in your body, sludge up and toxify the metabolism, thereby causing breakdown. Number two, or you don't, or I should say, you don't input enough appropriate nutrients into your body to compensate your metabolism from the output expenditure of your activities. So there's probably a lot of you that out there that realize that you've got too much output versus input, right? This concept of output versus input is extremely important in health. If you're not building and regenerating new cells, you're breaking down more quickly. We have a word for that. It's called catabolic. You break down more quickly than you repair. In the other situation, like when you're in your teenage years and 20s and so on, you have what's called an anabolic dominance, which means that you repair your cells more quickly than you break them down. That's why, the partiers in the, high school, and yes, I did too, but that you can recover a lot faster than when you're in
You waited until high school?
Yeah, right. I did. Well, I was, as you were too.
Late bloomer. Huh?
Well, I was a musician. I was playing an orchestra. I was
a nerd too.
Yeah, and I
But I was a cool nerd because I had long hair and a leather jacket and listened to heavy metal music.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, whatever your avenue or musical tastes, they possibly be eclectic. But in any case...
God, my musical tastes, you couldn't fit my musical tastes into one of our conversations.
I hear you. But it's that enjoyment that gives us the direction of health. That is a primary ingredient.
Yeah, we talked about that. If it feels good, go towards it. Well, the opposite of that then is true. You should be, if it feels bad, you should be moving away from it. And it can be, the problem with these sort of breakdowns is that they can be slow over time, and it's hard for people to catch themselves in the rut, especially if it's a simplified rut. It's something simple and easy to do. Just because it's simple and easy to do and is ultimately satisfying doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best thing for you.
That's the discernment piece, right? You have to identify, like with the food, if you know it's something that's bad for you, you got to stop yourself because it'll affect you negatively. But how often does it come into play where, but it tastes so good, and I don't, and you can look, I practice so much of what I preach, but if there's a little time and place where I break my pattern, I can let it go, but that's part of it. It's what we sometimes become too conformed to our regimen if we're trying to address something and removing the pleasure aspect of it, right? And Dr. Rosen had on his answering machine, he put his saying was, enjoy your life. You're the only one who can.
Right.
And it seems so simple, but
it's too simple. It's one of the problems with simple ideas. They're often too simple. People expect them to be much more complicated than that, and that's because they've been, as you would say, toilet trained in this. Really, it's a political societal thing that we're stuck in. There's a certain expectation through politics and society that says we're supposed to be a certain way, and that's relatively changing all the time, but it is in and of itself a problem, because when you're talking about authority, when you're talking about the state, government, society, things that sort of try to rule over the individual, it very much excludes the individual and individual experience. And so you get detached from the things that are important to the individual, the things that are missing. We're barely starting to, I think, understand now, maybe in our society, the importance of going back. And so what happened, though, is that it went too far, and we ended up in this place where we're coddling people and breeding a helplessness, a learned helplessness. It always was, because that's part of the problem with the state, is it breeds a learned helplessness. But now society has taken that on, and of course it would, because that's the structure that the system has set before it. And so we find ourselves sort of backpedaling from that now, and the people, obviously, the people on the right would be the ones that would be most aware of this in terms of what they think has changed from the sort of idyllic 50s, Leave It to Beaver appearance of society to what it's become today.
Right. They're being rewarded for their negative behavior.
Yeah. Yeah, boy, that was really quick to sum up what I just spent 2 minutes saying.
Well, the victimization piece is, as you had put it, learned. When you earned something, you had, a true sense of what we would use the word pride. Okay, and there's anything less than satisfaction is a lie. Any pride that hurts the swallow is false pride. So what you're getting here is a culture that has lost its momentum. Remember, half of the job here as beings on this planet is being aware. The other half is power. And power has no mind of its own. When you cannot break that pattern that you've been indoctrinated with, it controls you. No one controls me. I tell my, self in the morning, okay, where am I going to put my energy? What is important to me? How am I going to facilitate the process? And then go to it. You cannot do this without power. And it's interesting how so much power of our own energy is being just wasted, floundered into areas that are so nonsensical, so useless, and not facilitating what your true needs are, that it's to break that pattern instead of going in the same circle, going back to this, repeating that same pattern over and over, requires some insight and stillness. Now, I also put in that email, I wanted to talk about what is it that is causing us stress that keeps us away from what we want.
Right, where he mentioned it's not having enough energy to match that output. Yeah. That's what stress is.
Right. So we're talking about aiming to the solution. So now I'm describing the problem, which you've identified a very important one, which is this victimhood type of attitude. Entitlement is another one. But all these dysfunctional societal patterns that are going on, I'm looking at the solution. So I have to identify, where are these stressors coming from? So let's go into that for just a moment, okay? Stress. Stress is not having enough energy to match your output. If you have enough energy, then you are just busy. if the amount of energy you're using up in your activities is proportionate to the amount of energy replenished, then you keep the dynamic balance. If the amount of energy being spent is not proportionately replenished, then you wind down in an entropy of destabilizing disequilibrium. To compensate, you try to force your will to steal from one organ gland system to feed the output of another. In turn, this rips off the mental energy you could have used to nourish your creativity and or recreate relaxation. So your mind keeps tightening, winding toward the breaking point while your body is slackening, unwinding towards approximating death. Things feel stressful when you have to get the job done, yet you don't have enough vitality to physically power you. Stress is not having enough energy to match your output. Now, what is being done to us is distraction. We are constantly bombarded with information that is mostly useless.
Well, and then we misapproximate our stress to, we associate it with those externalities instead of necessarily our own physical and mental state.
Exactly. And I was going to ask you the question, because you had a busy week this last week, wasn't it? Busy.
I have things are in a constant state of change right now, just because I just have so many different things to juggle. I'm managing, sort of the old people in the family, the young people in the family, my own family, then the business and doing the podcast, and it's just a constant juggle. But to me, it's just life. It can be busy to other people, and taking away from maybe attention that they feel I need to give them or that they could use of my time. But that's not true. If it were important, I would deal with it.
Of course, we all have to be adaptable enough, and I would use the word flexibly adaptable, to change for the situation at hand. And that's part of the dance of life. If you meet people that are truly enjoying themselves, and I've been seeing a constant decline in happy people over the years.
Yeah.
It's been a, it's been a traumatic, life, for most people. And because of that trauma is part of their psyche now. Okay, wearing masks, forced injections, losing jobs economically, poisoning of food, all these different things are converging. Now, say that I have the unmitigating gall to say what I'm saying is to be true, to be so. Then I have to take on the responsibility of being challenged, and I am. That's a high bar I place for myself, right? And so what we have been seeing is a decline of our capabilities because the bar is not high for accomplishments. For example, if you go in for a job that you're more qualified than somebody else, but the other person might happen to be a female, or they may be of Indian heritage, or they may have some other let's just say minority status that the political agenda is doing everything they can to force upon a public. Then your qualifications, although they may be superior and your ability to do the job is better, you don't get it. Okay. And I've heard of this happening a lot. In fact,
It happens a lot. We're turning away. It's another symptom of the society, the same society, is that we're turning away from the meritocracy that breeds an environment of creativity, an environment of success, an environment of it being okay to be. That's one of the problems. Exactly what you're talking about right there is that it's a job. That's one of the big problems right there. So they're just showing up for a job, and they can't even just get a job. The job that, they're not even good enough for the job because they've been told that for some reason, some diversity thing is more important than their skills that they've worked on, that they've honed, that and then they go home and they turn on the TV. And on the TV, it's all glitz and glamour, and everything's perfect, and everything's great, and the state does everything right, and it's only the other guy's fault, it's only the other party's fault, and we're just so far disconnected. I can't even, because I could just run down all of these different things that are getting in between us and reality. We're told that so much of this over here is what's important, but we're never able to accomplish this over here because this is first of all, because it's held as being so important, it's captured. It's being controlled, it's manipulated, and you're only allowed to get into it if you're ready to play the game and do it their certain way. And so, and any deviation from that, anything different, anything that's outside the norm is discouraged. And that's where we are in relative to our society today, in a position where everybody's afraid to, but when it comes down to it, stand up to authority, stand up to what's supposedly the norm, what's supposedly supposed to be so great about what we are and who we are and what we're doing here in America. Well, if it's so damn great, why isn't it working? Why are we at the point where we are now, where they're more disinfected, more disillusioned, more people disconnected from not just the system? Hey, that's a good thing. If that were it, that'd be fantastic. That'd be fine, but they're disconnected from themselves. And at best, there's probably at least half of the population of the entire planet, certainly in the modern world, that is completely oblivious to any other reality than go to work, go to school, get a job, raise a family. There's nothing different out of that that's what they're programmed to do. And then on top of that, being shown that there's this unattainable other world. So no matter how good you are, or just sort of in the middle, you'd be lucky to be on the bottom and feel, well, I'm completely worthless to society. I don't have to contribute at all. But worse is the person that is contributing to society isn't getting jack squat for it. They're doing everything right. They're doing everything that they've been told to do from day one, and it doesn't change it. Nothing is changing. If anything, it's getting worse.
Okay, no, there's much to unpack there. I'd like to address when you said it's unattainable. Okay, now that I want to focus on for just a moment here. Most people are feeling in the political world that they've been denied access, right? We don't have any influence on what's being done to us. So it becomes the microcosm, as you had mentioned in previous shows, about anarchy being a inner working type of individual, small group type of
you and me.
Yes, right. That we have the unique way of navigating through what is valid and what isn't, right? One example of this is I could say that there's the political wokeism is a result of the bar being reduced. I just heard an example of the high jumper example where there was, and this is making it more personal, of course, but if you are an athlete, you're wanting to get that extra edge, aren't you? You're going to so you can win the race, or you can, do the perform the task, whatever it is. If you're a good swimmer, which I happen to enjoy a lot. I'm a hiker. I'm a swimmer. I bike. I'm active. I used to be a hockey player. But all these different activities, you wanted the edge to gain the to win the game, kind of thing. Okay, that was the objective, if you were to win the game. But it was also realizing that your body was, you had a demand on your body that was what we call eustress. Okay, that's versus distress. If you want to look it up later, that's fine. But that's a beneficial stress. I talked about stress before, where the output is higher than the input. But when you do something that gives you energy after you've accomplished it, maybe you're a long distance runner, okay, whatever it is that your activity is, it gives you something back, but it always takes energy to make energy. And when I was circling back to this political side of things and the high jumper example, there would be a bar that would be set, say, for 6 feet, okay? And you had 1,000 applicants, and only 5 of those 1,000 applicants were able to jump that 6 feet. So of those 5 applicants that did, they got a test. And if they passed this verbal test or written test, then they would get the job. And there was 2 of them that passed the test. So naturally, those 2 were capable, competent, and ready to perform the task, right? Meritocracy, you mentioned earlier. Well, if it's unattainable for them to reach that high level, then the people get so discouraged they end up reverting to fear patterns or patterns of destruction. And that's where we got right now. Crime is just off the chart. People are going literally nuts, and it's causing a breakdown in society. But who's the one that's in charge of these political decisions right now? Well, wokeism. I'll call it that, because what it is it's lowering the bar to, instead of it being 6 feet, 6 inches. And that means the 1,000 applicants, instead of it being 5 people that were able to accomplish jumping over the high 6 feet, now it's at 6 inches, and only 5 didn't jump over the 6 inches, and they were probably because they were injured, or maybe they were on drugs or something. But anyway, that means that the bar has been dropped so low that people that are put in positions of power are wholly incapable of making appropriate decisions.
We need James Cameron to come save us. That's what we need. James Cameron has to come save. The bar is so low, it's sunk down there like the Titanic, and there's only one person that can bring it. This is a South Park episode.
I see.
No, they literally, this is exactly what they're talking about, that the bar is so low. You're absolutely right. That's what we've done. We've eliminated any kind of standard that is based on. You could probably take it and break it down to certain categories of what standards are ignored now. The education one is still holding on. The real learned experience in education is still holding on there in a lot of places, but you see it slipping more and more. And why not? Because the value of what we understand to be education is almost zero. We're talking about public education, and then we're talking about a captured secondary education, and these are the things that, again, we're supposed to strive for. Hell, here in Kansas, these scumbags in office here just passed some legislation that changes some language required to graduate, things like that. And one of the things that they added to it, and I'm surprised that there was opposition, but there was opposition to it, is this a thing where you have to sign now a waiver when you graduate that says, I don't want to go to college, that I don't want to take out student loans. So it's almost, you get what I'm saying there, is that it's flipping around, and they're doing that in all these places. And again, all of these conversations that we have, you can really narrow them down. All the problems that we have socially, all the problems that we have as individuals, whether they be real people problems, real societal problems that would exist with or without government, they are certainly exacerbated by government. Government is this joke of a democracy that we live in is the cause of almost all of the stress, almost all of the ills in terms of our health, because it has allowed the medical system to be captured. It has allowed the food system to be captured. Well, it hasn't allowed those things. It's facilitated them. And so this is where we stand at this point, that every single one of these conversations that we have, at the heart of the problems, you have a blockade that is government, and it's one of the important things that we have to get people to understand in terms of the stress and in terms of these externalities, these things that are so much problems on the outside that there's nothing that we can do about them. And how important is this? This is really key to the idea that I speak about all the time, about simply taking your time, your energy, your money, and I throw in others, your health, your wealth, these things that are much more of a non-tangible idea that exist kind of within our own minds, and when those minds aren't fogged by government delusions and the glitz and glamour of the things that get popularized, you settle down and you realize that it's okay. It's really okay to be you. It's okay to be who you are, and it's okay to seek good things for you. So all of that comes to then the question of how do you manage that stress once you get past that realization? We've set all this aside, this whole idea of all these externalities that we can't manage ourselves. How do we manage ourselves when you're in terms of what you're talking about, stress? And I'm assuming that it's going to be, the normal things, get some exercise, maybe pick up some music, meditate, those kind of things.
Yeah, well, those are the ways that we uniquely manage our own stress levels. Look, whatever the stress level is, it's got to be matched with your input. And things, for me, I would call music my yoga.
Right, these are things that are replenishing. When you're talking about sleep and you're talking about exercise, you're not doing anything in sleep, but you are. Your body is resting, your brain is resting, obviously. And when you're exercising, it hurts at the time. It's stressful at the time. You sweat. It sucks, but the benefit of it in the long term, even in just a few minutes after exercising, you feel that you're so much lighter and so much stronger, and the blood's flowing, and the brain's functioning. I mean, these are ways to literally, physically push the stress out of you. I beat on the drums.
Very well. Todd Rundgren, I want to beat on my drums all day. Well, what you're referring to is, provided it's a valid type of exercise, right? You want to take your age into account, obviously. Walking is good for almost everybody as long as you're not injured, right? Yeah. Swimming, it's virtually impossible to injure yourself when you're swimming, but you got to find a good pool for that, right?
Swimming's a really good one because it builds strength.
It is, and flexibility. Yeah. You burn up a lot of calories that way. It's okay. So you have to uniquely tailor your input ratio, okay? And we all need, let's face it, we all need vindication, validation, and verification. We all need the 3 V's, as it is, because people around us, we're oftentimes those that really get it doing this alone. We're thinking, oh my gosh, but nobody does this work alone. That's the whole point, is that if you're feeling disconnected from the access to changing your reality from the, let's just make it simple, from the government position, that means that we have already changed the output, because we know the more energy that we give to these dysfunctional systems, the more we drain our energy, right? So we have to be very discerning. We have to have the capability of identifying what works and what doesn't. Our little community out here, there's 2,000 in the area, and they're going to be doing an interview of me where we're going to be talking about what to do in the case of a power outage. We're in remote. We have power outages pretty frequently, okay, due to weather or, breaking down infrastructure and so forth. But they're going to be interviewing me and what my part is on the medical side of things. And there's somebody locally who's doing a community garden. There's the fire department, and then these different disciplines, I would call them, of making it where they would use their talents in a community if we had to pull together in a situation where we didn't have access to running water, for example, or of course if the electricity goes down, or if there's a lot of people who become ill for whatever infectious agent is out there. But in any case, we have we're already organizing a plan, and there are communities out there that have done this and that are ahead of us. But be that as it is, this is a little late in the game, in my opinion, but it's better late than never to address the what ifs. What if we have a kind of plan, and if we have a forest fire and it starts coming down the mountain towards our community, where to escape to. But that's not enough. We have to do much better than that. What about clean water? What about people who are incapable of leaving their house on their own? Do we have these people if we can't communicate by phone or Facebook or something, if the cell phones go down? So we have a better system or places to go. I'm just speaking of one example of how we change without any political involvement, how we change our community to respond to need.
You're talking about madness. You're talking about anarchy. You're talking about a voluntary existence. When you mention firefighters in the fire department, local fire department, and one of the greatest examples of the truth of voluntary services like those is the fact that so many fantastic fire departments across the nation are voluntary fire departments.
Exactly so. Exactly, and that's all we've got out here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I shouldn't say all we've got, but it's
no. But most people don't even realize it. They don't even understand the importance of the idea that their local fire department is voluntary and not necessarily a function of the state.
So what I am most interested in, I was listening to Dr. Corey and Dr. Merrick yesterday, and how they're in that position of making a significant impact on our medical community. But it's been my motivation because consciousness has always been my thing. How the mind works. Why is it that we put ourselves in situations that we're in? What do we do to work ourselves out of things that aren't working? And when you're doing this, I found myself enjoying most everything I do. I mean, 90+% of the things that I do I enjoy, whether it's repairing my, broken wall hanger, or fixing my car, or something simple, or something that's complicated, like writing a manuscript that I recently was asked to do. And these are things that I realized that over the years, I've become happier, and I've enjoyed more and more of my process, mostly because I've overcome all these different places where I was wasting my energy, where I wasn't putting it where it was appropriately needed at the time.
You quit running in circles and you started taking aim and moving towards a solution.
Right. So if I'm to make an audacious claim like that, well, if I'm striving for 100% and I'm at 98, 99% already, then if something's coming into my life, it better be good. It better be worth my while, because I'm enjoying life. But I'm also working quite hard. No one could accuse me of being lazy, right? And that means that when I'm putting energy into something that is quite complicated, for example, right? That it requires me to do what? To pace myself. Because I've realized that with all the output that I give, and believe me, I can run circles around 20-year-olds, okay? I go to bed typically around 1:30, sometimes 2 in the morning, and I'm waking up at 7 and 7:30. And I sometimes like to get a little bit more, but I have a lot of output, and I don't like to minimize my sleep, but I have to know when it's time to get more sleep. Otherwise, I'm going to start to suffer, right? So that's one of the things that I have to gauge for myself.
Sleep's a big one. It's kind of number one on the list, I think, for a lot of people. Diet, sleep, those two are so right there at the top in terms of problems that people have across the board, particularly in the Western world, for sure.
And getting good sleep requires what nutrients are needed. Like magnesium, for example. Most people are deficient in magnesium. And I take some form of magnesium at night to help me sleep, because what is it? It relaxes the heart, okay? It relaxes the muscles. And if you get a heart attack, myocardial infarction, if you're doing the proper protocol in an ER, you're given magnesium as half of your treatment right away. It's very painful to inject it, but you need to get that heart out of its arrested state, okay? Arresting state. So you want to use magnesium. Now, calcium is the opposite, which gets the muscles going. That's why it's better to have more calcium when you're doing a hard workout. Anyway, that's just a little aside, but the point is, sleep is sometimes a very big problem with people not being able to shut their mind off.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, there's a lot of factors involved in there. There's diet involved in there. There's the physical stress throughout the day. And then there's all of those interests. Oh, I got to do that report tomorrow, or it's due this weekend. I need to mow the lawn. The car is broken. I still got to put that damn sign up at the back of the shop. That thing's been down for weeks now, and it's all because I keep forgetting. I finally did. I kept forgetting to get some transfer tape so I can transfer the outdoor vinyl stickers and lettering that I printed up to put on this gigantic sign at the back of the shop, which will shine brightly down a busy street advertising comic books for me. Just one more thing, keeping me from getting sleep.
Well, of course. And look, we might get hiccups now and then, but what the point is that we're telling people things that very often they already intuitively on their own level.
Well, of course they do, but they need to understand that that's one of the biggest problems. Again, just what I was just saying. It's okay. It's okay to need sleep. It's okay to recognize you need sleep. It's okay to recognize that you need to go talk to somebody about what's going on in your life. It's okay to you need to know that it's okay to cry. In some cases, that it's okay to laugh. That it's okay to not be okay with the way that things are.
So, in summation, and you're going to have probably a lot of your future guests that are going to cross over into this area, is how are they going to manage their output levels, right? How are they going to like your guest you had on voluntarianism last week? I would assume that this was the first time a lot of people had heard that word. It was new to me. But be that as it is, it puts you in a different state of mind to saying, yeah, I'm volunteering to participate or not. If I'm going to volunteer, then that means that I'm empowering myself to participate.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to be able.
Right. Yeah, that's at the core of it. There's so much value in the idea that you're doing something, whether it's contributing to society or whether it's helping another individual. There's so much value in it being a willful act and not being something that is a directive of the state or an ideology.
Yeah, and so that's our job. And then that's the whole point of this discussion today, is identifying what our input-output ratio is. Don't put energy into things that are creating you the same repetition of something that doesn't work or really serve you.
Yeah. The thing to do to keep repeating those things is to recognize the actual damage that they are doing to you, and that can be hard when we're talking about some of the things that diet should be obvious. It generally should be obvious. You feel like crap when you don't eat well versus when you do eat well, and people who eat well know that and understand that. But sort of your job or in relationships, some of the things that you mentioned, in those situations, you may not even realize that they're stressing you as much as you will at that time when you try to go to sleep. And it's the thing that pops up in your mind. What am I doing in this relationship? Why the hell am I going to get up and go to work tomorrow? Why am I, continuing to put up with the horrible hours and the crappy boss or whatever it is? And for most of us, for many people, that really is. Those are, I don't know. If you could make a top 5 list, those things that we've talked about, the sort of the diet and then the influence of working and the influence of relationships with other people as well as with ourselves, those things are right at the top up there in terms of our overall mental and physical health.
And in this, if you're going to live your life outside the law, you've got to be excruciatingly honest. Yeah. Because there are places where we know that these laws are put in place not for us. They're not intended to be for us. And so when you start to weed out what it is that isn't needed, right? All these you'd mentioned about signing the waiver, not to go to college. What insanity would persuade somebody to do that? I mean,
control, it's control. And it's so, our governor here is just as much a piece of garbage as any of these politicians are, no matter how cute the sweet little old lady she appears to be on the outside. She's a goddamn carpetbagger, man. She's not even from Kansas. She's from New York.
Well, okay. That's what I'm talking about, the lowering the bar.
Yeah, that's a low bar, New York.
These people
Rent's high, the bar's low.
They may be in positions of power, but they have really no reason that they're there. I mean, no competency to be there. Yeah. They're not deserving.
She's there because she's a politician. She's not there because she's the best person for the job.
No. So we know that our job, of course, is to provide foundation and I can take on any of the questions.
To that point, speaking to that point, providing the foundation, taking on the questions. You got just about 3.5 minutes or so here. Okay. Tell people how to get in touch with you, how to reach out to you. Ask those questions from a distance. Right. Of course, they can always go to towardanarchy.com. Anything you reach out to me we'll get to Dr. Lloyd.
Thank you for this, Michael, and your format. It's very helpful to have people that you've interviewed, some very good people listen to your shows. It's refreshing, and we need new energy that is going to get us through this absolutely insane time. I mean, this medically, I'm seeing things that are mistakes are being made in such dramatic ways. We have got to be extremely careful about using the medical profession. I don't want to go too much into it, but if you have questions, I want them to go through you. So have them email you and say it's for Dr. Dean Lloyd, and you'll send them to me, and we'll bring them up in the next show. That kind of thing.
It's rarely as obvious as that, but yes, that's what happens. Sometimes I will directly sort of say, here's a particular email, here's a particular thought from somebody who's listening. Let's directly address that. Otherwise, it just ends up being in terms of topic because one of the things that we have that's an issue, particularly now, is that we don't have the live audience anymore, and so we don't have the timeliness. Everything's at best it's a week later, if not more like a month later, since there'll be you're dropping in once a month. But if people could send me questions anytime, I can send them to Dr. Lloyd anytime. But you would have to wait ultimately, no matter what it was, to be addressed until the next issue, unless maybe he reaches out to you personally. I don't know. Is that something you're likely to do with somebody?
Yeah, what I would like to do is this. I think that's a very good point. And I think it'll help facilitate the timing because, there is a long gap. Yes. Let's do this. Go ahead and have them email you. And then when your first hour comes on the week after or something, you dedicate a few minutes like you had to Dear Abby. I will write out an answer. And then we'll expound on it when I'm
okay. All right. I see what you're getting at. Yeah. We can see how that works out.
We'll give it a shot. It's an experiment, but I want to be there for people. I've got all this. I'm sitting on a gold mine, literally, of information psychologically and medically in some areas. But I am so enjoying this process that it just my cuppeth floweth over, kind of thing.
Well, that's a good thing, and it's a good thing to always keep in mind because I know that I mentioned it earlier. The hardest part of being people like us, empathetic people, is that we can neglect ourselves. So don't do that to yourself, Dr. Lloyd. You won't ever catch me doing it.
Very good.
We got to go. Next week on the show, author Chris Underwood. We'll talk about prepping, and we'll talk about the grid and attacks on the grid, things like that. And, of course, we'll talk about his books, too. Until then, take care.